All 20 episodes of Season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy are now available on Netflix. At least they are here in the US. I'm not sure what the situation is in other countries, but then again, as an American, I'm accustomed to just assuming that everything is fine in other countries because things are fine here. And by the way, just as a quick aside, things are totally not fine here. Things are very much not fine here in the United States right now at all. But I assume things are fine everywhere else. So I don't know if Prodigy is available on Netflix or some other streaming platform or some other platform of some other kind where you live if you don't live in the United States, but it's available here in the United States as of yesterday, relative to the day I'm recording and probably releasing this video. And I mainlined the entire season yesterday. I finished up my work in the morning and then I spent the rest of the afternoon into the evening just binging all 20 episodes of Season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy. And I'm probably going to do a more considered scripted review, or if not a review, some kind of video about it at some point. But I just wanted to get some off-the-cuff thoughts on camera and out today, the day after the season was released, because there are a couple of things about Season 2 of Prodigy that really, that struck me as I was watching it, that stick in my mind, that I feel like I can just tell you about. And I'll keep this spoiler free for those of you who haven't watched it yet, but we're planning to. But the main overall point I want to make is it's a really good season. After I finished the first season of Prodigy, which now was a couple years ago, I said it's the best animated Star Trek series ever made, period. It's not even close. It's so far ahead of the other animated stuff that Star Trek has done. It's ridiculous. And not only is it the best animated Star Trek show ever, I still think, after having watched Season 2, the second best currently in production or recently produced Star Trek show, period. The only Star Trek show of the current production era of the franchise that I would say is better than Prodigy would be Strange New Worlds. Everything else falls behind it at various distances. Prodigy is just so good. That first season was excellent. The second season was excellent. Here are some of the things I noticed about the second season. It really is striking how much my reaction to Season 2 mirrors my reaction to Season 1. I went through very much the same journey in Season 2 as I did in Season 1. Just like Season 1, Season 2 starts out kind of slow. It takes it about 4 or 5, maybe 6 episodes for me to start getting really interesting and really good. I'm watching the first several episodes just kind of patiently, just sort of like it's not losing me. I'm not watching it going, oh God, what a waste of time. Why am I watching this? But I'm just kind of watching it and waiting and hoping that it starts to get good soon, and that was my experience with Season 1, and in Season 1, it was maybe a little bit more perilous because I didn't have a pre-existing affection for the show like I do coming into Season 2. So I was watching Season 1 going, all right, this is fine. I guess I'll keep watching it. And then as I kept watching it week after week, it grew on me. And then about 5 or 6 episodes in, I started to realize, oh, this is getting really good. And I had the same experience with Season 2, only in a much more compressed time frame, because Season 1 was released 1 episode per week. Season 2 dropped on Netflix all at once. So I was experiencing this over a matter of hours rather than several weeks or months. But it was the same emotional experience of, okay, it's starting out kind of slow. It hasn't really grabbed me. I'm not really sure what they're doing. It seems like they're really taking their time getting this thing started. But once it does get started, and once things really start to click, oh man, is it good. Like once it grabs you, or at least once it grabs me, it holds on for the entire rest of the season, all the way to episode 20. So very interesting how, and I was more willing to give it the time in the second season, because I knew going in, I expected that it would be a good show because I had ended up liking Season 1 so much. I do sometimes worry that, like, for a new viewer, it might start off a little bit slow. I do think maybe you could just start the season off a bit more strongly, have a bit stronger of a hook, have it feel not quite so much as, well, we're just taking our time and easing into this. Like, I don't really feel like that's a great way to tell a story, either in terms of wanting to tell the story in a really gripping way that would grab an audience. And also, just commercially, I don't know if that's the best choice to tell a story that takes so long to really get going, as opposed to trying to really sink your hooks into the audience right away. But that's a relatively minor criticism, because, as I said, once I got into the show, once it had me, and it is just a fantastic second season. There are character beats for our main cast that are just stunning in some cases. Like, the writing on this show, when it really hits its peak, when the writing in the show is as good as it gets, it is so good. It is as good as anything Star Trek is currently doing or has done for a very long time. I mean, it really, really grabs you and takes you to emotional places that you do not expect when you sit down to watch an animated Star Trek show that is primarily aimed at a young audience. Like, it really is just a phenomenally written, first and foremost, piece of work. Something else it does in season 2 that it didn't do as much of in season 1, but it still did, and it does to a greater extent in season 2, and is still impressive to me. The way it handles its use of fan service and nostalgia and legacy characters and member berries and all that stuff that I typically hate and wish that shows just wouldn't do at all. And that rule still holds for me. Like, there's stuff in season 2 of Prodigy that they do and they get away with, but I still think you'd be better off just not doing it, right? And again, I'm not going to get into spoiler territory, but here's the interesting thing about Prodigy. When Prodigy does things like drop in a legacy character, whether it's just for, a relatively brief appearance, or just the character doesn't even appear, but they're just mentioned in dialogue, and it's like a gratuitous reference. Like, there's no reason to mention Admiral Picard except it's Star Trek. Hey, everybody, Admiral Picard, you remember him. Like, it feels gratuitous and it feels unnecessary, and it's like, you can just leave that out. You don't need that. The show is strong enough on its own merit. You don't need to be constantly reminding us that it's Star Trek, right? But when it brings in legacy characters for more substantial roles, which again is something that when I first see it starting to happen, I instinctively just sort of roll my eyes and go, here we go, right? This show, more than any other show in Star Trek, finds a way to start out with something that just instinctively annoys me, but then turn it around so that not only am I tolerating it and not considering it a problem anymore, but there comes a point where I'm actually kind of into it, where I'm actually liking what they're doing with this legacy character, because they treat the legacy characters like characters in this show. And that's, I think, the important distinction to make between how legacy characters are treated in Prodigy and how legacy characters are treated in other shows, not just other Star Trek shows, but legacy characters from other franchises. The legacy characters that are brought into Prodigy don't feel like they're visiting from another show. And they don't feel like the only reason they're there is to just wave at us and go, hey, look, remember me from that other show? They become characters in this show. And they have stories that begin and continue and end in this show. And there are a couple of beats there's one legacy character in particular who ends up playing a pretty major role in the show. And I'm not going to tell you who it is because I don't want to spoil it, because it's not one of the ones that was included in the marketing for the show. Like, I could tell you, Chakotay's in this season. Everybody knows Chakotay is in this season. He was in the trailer. His Robert Beltran's name is in the opening credits. It's not a surprise or a spoiler to say that Chakotay is in this show, and he is, and he plays a pretty major part, and he's really good. And that's something I'll get to in a second. But there are other legacy characters, including one in particular who I don't think I saw, because when he showed up, it was a surprise to me, and I don't think he was. I'll give you a hint. It's a he. He plays a major role, and I don't think he was teased in the marketing or revealed in the marketing, so I don't want to spoil it for you. But he shows up, becomes an important character, has an arc of his own in the show that is not tied to anything that he did on his old show. that, there are references to what he did and who he was on his old show, but his story arc is not rooted in that. It doesn't feel like it's a continuation of that, or it's an attempt by the writers of this show to try and resolve something from an old show or continue a story from an old show. It doesn't feel like they're trying to write an episode of the old show into their show, which again is something that it feels like is being done sometimes, and is something that I'm not a fan of. And then this character has a resolution and is written and acted so well that it's almost like the writers of Prodigy take this as a challenge. They take legacy characters that maybe weren't used to their full potential on their original show and have been brought back for sort of cameo appearances more recently and have been underwhelming. And it's like the writers of Prodigy said, oh, you know what? We're going to take this character, we're going to bring them into our show, and we're going to do it even better, and we're going to show you how it's done. And that's kind of what they do with this character and other legacy characters as well, who pop up here and there in this season. So even though I am still not a fan of the practice in general, and even though I still really, really wish that long-running franchises like Star Trek or Star Wars would just not do it, would just not have legacy characters pop up like this, and would, if you're doing an original show, do an original show with your original characters. But if you insist, if you insist on doing it, the model for how you should do it should be Star Trek Prodigy, because they do it better, with the exception of maybe Strange New Worlds, which has legacy characters just in the regular cast. Like, half the cast of Strange New Worlds is characters who are drawn from older Star Trek shows. That's a little bit different. Those are series regulars. And again, I still kind of wish that we would have more Star Trek with just completely original characters. But other than that, if you're going to have legacy characters come in and kind of be guest stars or be recurring characters and not be baked in members of the cast, the way Prodigy does it, to me, is the best I've ever seen it done. So kudos to the writers for that point in particular. And as far as the legacy characters like Chakotay and Janeway, who are regular parts of the cast of the show, who don't just pop in every episode or two for a guest appearance, but are actually in the main credits regular cast, it is stunning to me how well the character of Chakotay is written in this season. Like, Chakotay is in season 2 a lot. Again, I'm not going to say, it's not a spoiler, he's in the marketing. Chakotay's in season 2 of Prodigy a lot. And he winds up being one of the best parts of the show. Like, and I'll give it kudos to Robert Beltran. He's kind of an asshole in real life. I know he's not a lot of people's favorite Star Trek actor, deservedly so, for what a prick he was during the writer's strike. But just purely in terms of his performance, he's fantastic. And Chakotay has never been this good. Like, Voyager has never been my favorite Star Trek show. And Chakotay has been the butt of many of my jokes over the years. How nondescript he is, how he's one of the characters that they just kind of, it's like they have a dartboard covered with index cards of just randomly assigned character traits, and they throw a dart and whatever it lands on. Okay, that's boxing. Fuck yeah, Chakotay's a boxer. Like, that was kind of the nature of his characterization during Voyager. He was just not a very well-written or consistently conceived character. In Prodigy, he is a fantastic character. They give him a core that he never really had during Voyager. They give him a character arc that he never really had during Voyager. They give him relationships with the other characters that feel genuine and meaningful, that again he never really had they give Chakotay comes out as a more fully realized character after one season of Prodigy, where he's not even in every episode, and he's not even in an important role in all the episodes that he is in, but he's in enough episodes, and he's given enough focus, and his story is given enough time, and his writing is good enough that after 120 episode of an animated kids show, he is a better character than he was after 7 years as a main cast opening credits regular on a live action 1 hour weekly Star Trek series. Voyager couldn't do in 7 years what one 20 episode season of Prodigy does for Chakotay. It's remarkable. It's what an incredible rehab for that character. And again, I'm sure the writers didn't look at it. It's not, they probably didn't say, okay, time to rehab Chakotay, but that's what they did. They took a relatively forgettable, mediocre character from a relatively forgettable, mediocre show. And they turned him into just a fantastic character. Nobility, tragedy, regret, but also determination and the wanting to do the right thing, facing personal sacrifice, but also rising to the occasion. And there's all these things that Chakotay has going for him in his story in Prodigy season 2 that you would never have expected if the only thing you knew of Chakotay was remembering him from Star Trek Voyager. It's just really, really, really well done. And there are other characters from Voyager and from other Star Trek shows that pop up that get similar treatment, that are just so well written. But Prodigy is about its core cast. It's about the kids, right? It's about Dal and Gwyn and Rock and Zero and Jangum and and Murph, let's not forget. And they all have their moments. They all have little arcs that, they go through. Not every, like Murph doesn't have a huge arc this season. Rocktack doesn't have a huge arc this season, but Dal does, Gwyn does. Zero really has a fantastic story this season that is told periodically across several episodes and culminates in one of the most just moving, selfless acts that a character can do. And then is resolved in a really satisfying way after that. It's just the kids' characters are really well done this year. They continue to be the heart of the show. The show does not sacrifice their story or force them to play second fiddle to these legacy characters and guest stars that are coming in. Like, it's always focused on the kids. They are the ones who are driving the plot. They are the stars of the show. They are the core, the center of the story, and they carry it effortlessly in terms of the writing and in terms of the performances of the actors playing them. Everybody just does such a great job. And like I said, when it really gets cooking, it's gripping and it holds on for the entire season. The structure of the season, this is something I harp on all the time about streaming shows, whether it's Star Trek or an MCU show or Star Wars or whatever. The season-long story structure of these streaming shows, where they try to do these serialized stories and it just winds up playing like this should have been a 90-minute movie, and for some reason they've stretched it out into a 15-episode thing, right? Season 1 of Discovery. Season 1 of Prodigy did not have that problem. Season 2 of Prodigy does not have that problem. There is a single overarching story that is told from episode 1 to episode 20. There is a big goal that the characters have from pretty much the first episode that they don't actually achieve or face, make an effort to achieve until episode 20. But there's other stuff going on in the meantime. It's not just a single uninterrupted 20-episode quest to get from point A to point B. There are mini arcs running all through it. It's broken up into different sections. There's 4 episodes that get you to this point, and then it pivots and moves in another direction for several more episodes, and then it pivots and moves in another direction. There are mostly standalone episodes here and there. There are little 2-part story arcs. There are 3-part story arcs, and it all ultimately serves the big story that runs across all 20 episodes, but it's broken up into sections, and each little miniature story has its own beginning and middle and end and reason for existing and bits of characterization. And it's just purely in terms of the story structure. Fantastically done. Again, this is the way you should do it. The only minor quibble that I would make in terms of that is sometimes the endings of the episodes feel really abrupt. And there are many episodes in the 20-episode season that just feel unfinished. It feels like, okay, that's 24 minutes, that's it. And that's the end. So it doesn't even end so much on a cliffhanger, but in a we're out of time kind of way. And it's not as much of a problem, practically speaking, when you have all 20 episodes in front of you at once and you can just go from one to the next. But it is a story that they are telling in an episodic structure, and I would prefer that each individual episode have a bit more of a feeling of completion that also leads you to the next episode, as opposed to just feeling like, well, that's it, tune in next time. We're out of time, folks, sorry. And it feels like that a lot. I feel like they could have structured the individual episodes a little better so that they felt, even when they were parts of a larger story, that they felt a little bit more self-contained. And there was either a more coherent conclusion at the end or more of a, sort of leading hook into the next episode, instead of just feeling like, well, we're out of time. And it felt that way for quite a few episodes this season. But again, that is a relatively minor quibble considering how good it all turns out to be. I was watching it and I was thinking to myself, how is it that this animated series of half-hour episodes produced primarily for an audience of children is better written and more emotionally complex and more emotionally mature and more thrilling and gripping and satisfying and compelling than certainly not all of the other Star Trek from the current era, because there has been, Prodigy is not the only good Star Trek currently being made by far, but it's so much better than most of it, and on a more consistent basis, that it's just remarkable to think, how is it that this Star Trek cartoon made for children is better, especially in terms of its writing, is so much better than most of the other Star Trek of this current era. And I am not a hater of current Star Trek. I am critical of it. And when it does something that doesn't work for me, I say that. I'm not a cheerleader. But when it does something that does work for me and I think it's great, I say that too, right? I mean, I'm wearing a Discovery t-shirt. So I'm not a hater of current Star Trek. I'm a big fan of a lot of it, but it has its problems and it has its flaws. But Prodigy seems to have fewer flaws than I would say. Again, all of it except Strange New Worlds for me. It's just an incredibly well done show. So if you are a Star Trek fan, if you are someone who has access to Netflix and it's streaming on Netflix in your country, if you have not done so already, I highly recommend checking out season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy. And based on the way that season 2 ends, and that's another thing it does, it ties into a storyline from another current Star Trek show, but it does it in a way that, and at first when they were doing it, it started to get annoying to me because I was like, why are they doing this? This feels out of place. This plot being introduced in like the last episode of season 2 has nothing to do with anything else that's happened in this show. It feels like it's just imported from something else just for the sake of it. And just as I was starting to lose patience with it, they revealed like, oh, they're using this as the setup for the premise that would be the starting point of season 3 if they get to do a season 3. And it winds up being really well done. And given where they leave things at the end of season 2 and the potential for what season 3 could be based on the ending point of season 2, I really hope they get a season 3. It's a fantastic show. Everybody involved with it should be very proud of the work they've done here. And if you are a Trekkie and you want to watch just a fantastic Star Trek series, season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy is on Netflix. Hopefully it's available wherever you happen to live in the world. I would highly recommend watching it as soon as possible. And I will make an effort to do a more proper, scripted, coherent video about it at some point if I can sink my hooks into it and find like something that I can wrench into a video thesis. And it won't just me sitting here gushing about it for half an hour. But if you please do yourself a favor and watch season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy. If you like it anywhere near as much as I wound up liking it, you'll like it a lot. Well done to everyone involved. Well done to everyone involved.